Hello, everyone. I'm Shaunga. Welcome back to Otherworldly Giants, home of the Ancestors Writers Room and our open classroom. All right, let's just get into it. It's just me today. If you've been following along, I've had my friends Abby and Raven along for the ride in this open classroom all of June. July is a bit busier for schedules and stuff, and so it's just me right now. Um, but that's okay because I like talking to my face on Zoom and to all of you. And yeah, so in this open classroom, I want to bring it back to the basics. I want to talk about a few fundamentals for storytellers who create in collaboration with the spirit world, with ancestors, with our earthly non-human relatives, and with metaphysical technologies. So, you might be an established healer with a spiritual practice, and maybe you want to invest more into the creative works of art, right, that are being birthed through you. And you want your creative process to be built in a foundation of ancestor veneration and ceremony, instead of having to keep those two things separate. Or you might be an emerging or established writer or artist, and you feel deeply connected to the spirit world. And you want to explore bringing your craft back to its ancestral roots and its ancient village roots and technologies. And you want to open up more to that experience of spirit. Um, and again, let's come in at the get-go knowing that these two things don't have to be separate. And maybe you're someone who, is deep in the alchemy, deep in the roots of creating in this way. And you want to create within an ecosystem that actually understands this process, this kind of wisdom keeping process, right? And thus can properly support the full process of what it's actually like, in craft, but also in our lives when we open up to the otherworldly and we bring in these major ancestral energies into our stories and into our lives. And if you follow me, you know that I also don't keep our social and political realities separate either. So for me, the spiritual is political and it's also the artistic and it's also the ancestral and it's also the creative. So all of what, I show up with is liberation work and solidarity work, and that's what my ancestor healing is. It's wide scale planetary healing work. And I'm gonna keep making a point of just reminding people of that because I think that's important in this day and age. And I have a lot on my website in terms of, my specific political commitments. I'm not going to get into that right now, but you can always like learn more about me. Because yeah, it's very, the spiritual and political is very connected for me. And you know what? If you're kind of listening, if you've been following along, you understand that. Um, but today I wanted to do a class just to focus on my writers, okay? So, what are you guys working on? Fiction, memoir, screenplay, musical, graphic novels, comics, yeah, some kind of, creative nonfiction. Um, what I have to say in this class does apply across the board, and there'll be other classes where I want to, talk, focus on other specific roles like the director, the producer, the actor, designers. But starting with the writer, because the writer is, very, very close to my heart. Um, I might consider myself a writer first. I don't know. I'm a storyteller first. But the fundamentals of this kind of the fundamentals for the writer as energy healer really can be applied for creators across the board. So I want to just, take like a bird's eye view today. And talk about some of the basic tenets that I look at, right? When you're approaching your writing project in this area. And the first thing that you want to do is think about your story as an altar designed to hold a transition process. So, this is my experience, my view, right? Like stories come to us when they emerge from our ancestral DNA, or sometimes they descend from our cosmic DNA, right? Or they're given to us by different parts of the land, different parts of the spirit world. Stories they land in our consciousness, they're given to us, right? They don't just appear, they're given back. And they're given at very particular moments in our healing journey. Stories will emerge for a very important reason. And we might not know what that is while it's happening. You know, I always give this example, right? Like, um, my my first ensemble play that I wrote in 2016. I wrote the script. It felt like I was gonna say descended, but I feel like it just like from all angles, it just like came to me and landed straight in my heart. And this one is called Letters to the Universe, right? If you know me, you've heard me talk about this play before. Um, yeah, in September 2015, it descended upon me like that. I don't know if descended is the right word, but it just like it gathered into me. And I just like, when sometimes, yeah, I'm curious about other people's processes, in terms of, how stories come to you, right? Like I will often get the title first, or I'll get just a little, like a download of the entire story all at once. Um, I'm curious about, other people in terms of like how do you get your ideas for your stories? How do they come to you? Often I get it all at once. And then the challenge is to go, one step at a time, trying to unfold and, put it all down. Um, but yeah, it all came to me in September 2015. And I didn't know what kind of transition process it came to me for. It came to me for my dad's literal transition. So it became a story that held that transition in my life as an altar. And so, first, we want to recognize that when we create stories in this way, we create stories as altars for our loved ones to become loved ones inside. Like, I was becoming something, and my dad was becoming something. He was becoming an ancestor, right? And so our stories will come and help our ancestors evolve, whether they're transitioning from body into spirit, or whether they're all already in the spirit realm, or whether it's like an ancestral energy inside of us, right? It doesn't mean that, transition doesn't always mean literal death. It can. And I have many examples of that in my personal life. What can you say? I'm a death doula, I'm a death surgeon, right? But like it doesn't have to be that, right? It can just be like a major dying process within yourself and rebirthing process within yourself. You could be changing cities, falling in love with someone else, right? So something very personal in you is going through a major change. And that change, if you really study what that change is, it's a fractal of a larger global and collective change. It's something that the village needs to change as a whole to change or grow into. The village as a whole, our global village, is trying to evolve into something, and you're part of that. And it's something deeply unearthed too, an ancestral promise from your lineage coming into fruition. So that's first of all what we want to take that big eagle eye view on our story. Um, and why do we need an altar? Why do we need a story? Well, oh yeah, what does an altar give us? It's a grounding agent, right? It's a protective portal. It's a sacred site. There's designated guardians, right? There's gateways to other worlds and dimensions, right? If someone or something is moving into another realm of light, someone has to open the door, right? Someone has to help them through that process. This is why we have doulas, right? A story as doula. Um, it's just this basic principle. When we go through a big change, we need someone, something to hold us, right? And that's what our stories become. They become these living, dynamic, sacred sites, ushering us through a great change, guiding us and directing us through it. And so First, as a fundamental principle, we want to regard our stories as sovereign living beings. They're made of living beings, of ancestors, um, of relatives, whether they're tree relatives or rock relatives, water, fire, the elements, right? Your altar has a personality. It has desires and wishes of its own. Your story has that. And your story has a reason for wanting to collaborate with you and for trusting you, right? And not just, to bring it to life, but to be good to it in every phase of its development. So here's where I want us to think about that first and foremost. Um, or think about this as a practice to sit with your story and say to your story, I want to be good to you. How do I do that? What do you need from me? How do I show up for you? In this realm of creation, your story will answer you when you ask those questions. And it will keep answering you throughout your life, no matter, even if it's years after you finished writing it down. Letters to the universe, it still talks to me. It still answers my question of how do I be good to you? And when it comes to the most important stories that we have to tell, as a fundamental principle, if we're looking at this earth honoring ceremonial work, our stories, this relationship is reciprocal. Okay, so when you're good to your story, when you really learn how to be good to your story, it helps you become more of yourself, the version of you you're longing to be. And in doing that, it helps your entire lineage become more of itself. hmm In learning how to be good to your story and good to your process of creation, your story teaches you how to be good to your own humanity. And then that's what we take back into the village. That's our gift that we offer others. I've learned how to be better to my own humanity, and thus this helps the village become more of its humanity as well. Um, so yeah, if we're looking at this story as the altar, as a portal, a site holding big or small change, your story as an altar then becomes a representative of a movement, in content, in form, and experience, right? A representative of the movement of how your ancestors would express themselves, how they would organize, how they would live, had they not been interrupted by colonization as survivors or perpetrators or both. Your story becomes a representative of a lineage determined to re-dash member itself. And that adds to a global thriving village determined to re-dash member itself. So if you'll notice, I'm taking the time to break all this down because, there's a lot of I want to say the word vitriol going on out there, and a lot of it causes us to question our worth or our how much we do or don't matter to this moment in time, right? When there's so much going on. We gotta hold the field. We gotta hold the field and bring something very important that needs to be birthed toward this deeper mission of remembering the global thriving village and what important part you have to play in that through your story. So when you're this kind of storyteller, the whole process inevitably organizes itself as an altar as well. So the content, the form, the structure, right? The structure of your script, the structure of your poem, um, the process you have to go through and how what you thought you knew about your writing process has to now shift and adjust in order to get used to this kind of altar and how this specific kind of altar is functioning. Um, and so in every, whether it's chapter or section or scene or episode, every song, if it's an album, every phase of the process, um, you'll find centerpieces of this altar. And so the altar will, reveal itself to you exactly what it is over time. And in each place, you'll find those centerpieces. And so I'm calling those, the kinds of things you might find in an altar, sacred objects, um, milestones, crossroads, symbols, synchronicities, um, echoes across dimensions, repetitions. We talked about the medicine of repetition a couple videos back. You'll find allies and collaborators. You'll find offerings and adornments. And so you can look at your story, you can look at one paragraph and look at like, what is this altar? Is it, a bunch of small things on this altar, or is there just one centerpiece, right? You can think about that as a cinematographer, right? It's like when I'm shooting something, shooting a scene, how is this functioning as an altar? Um, and those become guiding posts, those altar pieces. Um, they do what things do on an altar, right? They can guide you. They can be lighthouses, they're gems, they're gifts, they're weapons, right? And all of these things are medicine that your lineage is giving back to you, so you can then give back to the world. And essentially, all of our altar pieces in the story are parts of you that you're trying to remember, parts of you that you're trying to become, that you're longing to come home to. So, yeah, every story is an energy healer in this perspective, right? Um, in this worldview. And so every, altars are as different as there are, different kinds of books. Um, they come in different shapes and sizes, they have different purposes, um, and they have a unique way of functioning, a unique technology, a rhythm, a shape. And so you can go into whatever stories you're writing and study these altar pieces, right? You can zero in on a paragraph or a short scene, and look at, what sacred objects are here? Is there a crossroads happening here? Um, are there gifts that are trying to be given and to whom? Who needs an offering here, right? So, for example, if I am, say creating a series of stories, right? So I have a podcast drama. Um, it's my live multiverse memoir. And so this isn't necessarily something that I went in and studied. This is just an example off the top of my head. I would have to go back and see um, if this is actually true or not. I think it is. So I'm like, because I just wrote this down in my notes as an example before I turned on the video. But for example, if episode one as an energy healer, as an altar, I can go and look at it and say, oh, that's a lighthouse. And episode two maybe is a whirlpool. And that's where I was like, when I wrote these notes, I was like, oh, just I'll put down it as an example. But I actually think that's true. When I think about my episode one, um, the first three episodes were named after colors. There was gold, yellow, and red. And that might be true. That might be true. Yellow might be a whirlpool, and gold might be a lighthouse. But anyway, so just for example, so say I'm looking at that as an altar, it's a lighthouse. That doesn't mean the setting is, right? There's actually in that episode, there's nothing that I say about a lighthouse. It doesn't take place in a lighthouse. It could be, but that's not what I mean when I say what is the altar. So I'm saying, when we think about how do we study a story? How do we understand a story? We can go in and say, oh, those are the characters, that's the setting, this is the political worldview. We can like break it down in all these different ways, right? But underneath all that, what is this episode doing? What is the story doing as an active energy healer? So even if, for example, a story takes place in an elementary school, we can say, oh, it's in an elementary school, but what it's doing as an energy healer, it's being a lighthouse. That's its medicine. Okay. And so, episode two, the medicine is the whirlpool. And then maybe the whole season, if we're saying, season one is a sun rising over a mountain, just that one specific time of day. So, like other traditions, they don't teach us how to look at our stories this way, right? Writing craft or whatever. They don't teach us how to look at, what's the ancestral medicine that's happening here? What are the ancestral agreements on an altar? What are the soul contracts or relationship contracts that are under review? Like, what is actually the soul doing here? What is it undoing? What is this altar in devotion to? And is that align with what I believe in, right? How is the energy healing functioning here? Is this story, the energy healing, is it like long and slow and underground? Or is it like quick and sharp moving like shooting an arrow? And if it's shooting an arrow, what is it shooting at? So because so many of us are awakened, right, to the spirit world, we are activating energy healing through our stories. Many of us don't know that we're doing that. And if you don't act intentionally in that process, then you don't know what you're doing, right? And so you might be doing things with your energy that you actually don't want to be doing. So there's a whole, conversation here about, how to create responsibly with the spirit world, how to do it safely, how to do it intentionally so that, even if you have really amazing, political or creative goals, energetically something is off and it's not bringing the most impact that it could into the world because of that energetic realm. That's where we need to bring awareness to this energetic realm and then understand how to work with it um, in that particular technology. That's where we make our biggest impact. Um, and also understanding that people will react to your story based on what the energy healing is doing. And I've experienced that again and again and again. I write a story, I'm like, why are people having such intense reactions to it? Oh, because they're reacting to the energy in it. Not just what I said, but the energy of what the altar is doing. Okay? And I'll say too that it's just very important work. It's a very important field of work that's needed right now on the planet. I really encourage people to shift into this practice if it's calling you. And know that something is calling you, right? Because some people will be like, I don't know what's going on with my process right now. Perhaps the calling of the village role is calling you, right? There's a big calling on the planet right now for the writer as energy healer to come back and take center stage on the world stage, right? And if that calling is calling you, look into that because it's incredibly important, needed work on the planet right now for many reasons that I don't have time to get into in this video, but I'm sure I will at some point if you continue listening to me talk. But let me say that, just if you look into and feel into the ancient roots, the ancient village roots of who the storyteller was and the role they played in the village, The storyteller was always revered and understood as an energy healer and as an altar carrier. And when the village went through a major change, we turned to the storyteller first for counsel, for guidance, for leadership. And we resourced them and protected them accordingly. Because when we are going through a big change as a village, we know the storyteller's role is to help us become more of ourselves, is to actually be that lighthouse, right? And we did that for our storytellers. We turned to them. Whether the village was going through change in a state of thriving or in a state of catastrophe, whether the village was in a season of abundance or lack. Um, there, for me personally, there isn't anything that could happen on our globe, whether quote unquote good or bad, that would make me feel like turning away from the storyteller is appropriate. You know, there's obviously roles that we play and lanes that we stay in, right? And work that we do and work that we don't do. But this whole, kind of narrative out there that keeps pushing away the work of energy healers and storytellers onto the sidelines, kind of saying, we'll deal with you later, or we need you later, you're not as important now. As a whole collective strategy, I, like I don't buy into that. And I'll never participate in that, although I'm not really interested in arguing with people either. I'm just about that's just not how we do things, according to what makes sense to me in my memories, in my decisions of like why I'm alive here and how I'm going to orient myself in this period of time. We never pushed them away and said it's not time for us to turn to you. We turned to the storyteller, okay? And we prioritized that medicine. We turned up the volume. Um, because we know that this is what we need when something is going through enormous change. We need those altars and we need the writer as energy healer. hmm And so, when we can, zoom back on the project that you're working on, right? Take this understanding of what your story is doing on these multidimensional levels. What role then does this altar play in your life, in your healing journey, in your connection to community? It's just, bottom line, being able to understand our stories and our process like this, it brings us a more full experience of the process. It brings us a fuller experience in life. It will challenge us, right? It will, cut things out of your life that aren't actually serving you, becoming the version of yourself that is capable of telling this story, that is capable of being the prayer that your ancestors are birthing, right? So there will be painful moments, but we're in an era of time where it's really important for us to organize around who we are so that those painful moments are actually less and less and less painful. Like there's still going to be painful moments, but the pain of like not having support, the pain of not having support through a painful process, like that's a layer that we don't need, right? Okay, so going back to this example, um, if I know that episode one as energetic medicine is a lighthouse and episode two is a whirlpool as energetic medicine, right? I can approach tending to those stories differently. How do you be good to a lighthouse? Different than how do you be good to a whirlpool? And that, once you know that too, you can have so much fun in the writing process, right? Like, um, how would the characters speak differently? What kind of dialogue would be different in these two different environments? How would they move differently? And as a director, you can give that information to your actors, right? You can say this takes place in a school, but we're bringing forth the medicine of the lighthouse here. So how would you play your characters accordingly? And for example, if I understand my story or this song, for example, maybe song two. I just thought of that song, Blur. I'm not gonna that woohoo song. It's called song two. Anyway, perhaps song two on your album that you're creating is you've seen this that it's a whirlpool. And if you understand the medicine of a whirlpool, and then you see someone in your village who is struggling with a type of like illness or poison or whatever concern in their life, and they need the antidote of a whirlpool, you can say, hey, I can offer my story as medicine here. So knowing who your story is as an energy healer gives you that guidance on your writing process. Um, and it helps you understand how to adjust your process of telling that story in order to engage with that energy. Because as you're writing it, you will be learning a lesson of the lighthouse, of the whirlpool, right? For example, if I want to find collaborators, if I'm like, I want to, shoot an episode with actors, if I want to shoot this episode with actors, a lighthouse will tell me something about how to engage that process of trying to find the right collaborators, right? A lighthouse will tell me to stay where I am and shine my light and just put out the call and shine it out, right? Don't go running around trying to find people. Don't uproot yourself. Be where you are and just radiate. A whirlpool will tell me, maybe in order to find what I'm looking for, I need to surrender, right? That's what you got to do in a whirlpool. You got to surrender to the things that are out of your control. And you maybe have to learn in a very tough environment how to discern like what is and isn't in my control. And don't fight things that are bigger than me. That's what you got to do in a whirlpool. You have to stop fighting. And once you do that, it'll just like gently show you the right way. Or maybe it's a different kind of whirlpool, right? Maybe it's like, maybe you're not in danger. Maybe this is about like, oh, I just got to relax. Like I'm tired. My body is aching. So let the energy of this water soothe your body. So this is an example if you're looking for something in your process or in life or whatever, and this story as an altar is carrying you, and you're like, oh, I got to keep working. I got to keep, I can't take a break. I got to keep finding. And the whirlpool is like, relax. Actually, this is what you have to do right now is receive. Just let the water massage your body. That's actually what you need here. And trust. And then we can go deeper and unlock. Okay, if my story is a lighthouse, what is a gift that a lighthouse brings to a village? What is a gift that a lighthouse brings to a liberation movement? What is a gift that it brings to my relationships? And maybe something is telling me to be that right now in a liberation movement, in a relationship. And what's a gift of a whirlpool? Maybe something is telling me, trying to show me how to be that in community, in the village, or how to point to that, right? How to point to say, this is actually a story that helps us learn what we're all trying to remember here. And so when you're really skilled at studying stories like this, you can go in and really pull all the medicine out, right? You can pull it out of a two-page scene. You can pull out, 10 pages worth of medicine out of just, a small thing. And you can pull out so many lessons and gifts according, that are really arising according to this moment in time. Um, yeah, understanding your book in this way, it doesn't just help you through life. Um, it feeds into your marketing, right? Now you have all this wisdom about like, oh, this is how to promote my book. This is how to market my book. Like, this is its deeper medicine. This is who the medicine is for. This is what it gives a village. This is what it's, this is the realm of life that, these are the topics that it's engaging with on that deeper energetic level. Um, and it gives you guidance on how to show up, right? How do I find my readers? How do I set up the energetic or physical structure of my book tour? And it keeps reminding you, right, of what the medicine is, what the lesson is. Oh, yeah, I'm a lighthouse. My job is to just sit here and shine. Oh, yeah, I'm a whirlpool, right? Like, this is who I'm for. So yeah, this is something something simple that you can do for your practice today, or whenever you're watching this video, is sit with a part of the story you're writing, whether it's a chapter or, if it's a comic book or something, right? Like uh, a scene from your screenplay. Sit with a section of it or the energy of it as a whole, and just listen to it. See if you can kind of feel the energy of it. And it can be any process, right? Go back to something you've written before, look at something you're in process with, or maybe you're just thinking about a story and you haven't written anything down. You can do this with any phase of development. Listen to it, listen to the shape of it, see if you can see what it is as an altar. What kind of shape is it? And then look for altar pieces. Um, what kind of shape is it and what kind of geographic terrain is it? What kind of cosmic terrain is it? What elements does it live in? And then inside of that, look for its altar pieces. Look for the symbols, the images, the milestones, the crossroads. Um, so you can study it like that if you like kind of scanning in that way. Or you can just talk to it, right? You can interview it. You can sit down and journal, or you can just like meditate. Yeah, just ask it whatever questions you want. Like, what kind of altar are you? What's your medicine? How do I show up for you? Um, and just, kind of engage that deeper conversation with your story about like what's the deeper medicine going on here? As writers, I think we do have practices of like, yeah, interview your story for the sake of like trying to write it out or push it out. But can we interview our story around its deeper medicine and see what that brings up? What is it helping you remember? What relationship principles is it illuminating? So basically, what I'm describing to you is my practice that I call divinatory dramaturgy. So, a dramaturg, as an artistic role, is someone who comes into a process and gives feedback to the writer and director about the story, no matter what phase it's in. And this is a really important role, right? Because if you're a writer, a storyteller, director, an actor, designer, right? You're in the story, so you can't always see the bigger picture. Even as the director, you're very close to it, right? And so the dramaturg comes in because they have a space. They're not like involved so deeply in your everyday creation of the story. They're a little bit removed from it, so they can have a little bit, um, they can bring the eye of someone who's not looking at it every day. But they kind of sit in between the story and the audience because the audience is a little bit too far away, right? That the audience that you would then gather for the finished project, it's too far away, and they're not the right collaborators to help you get a certain amount of feedback on your process, right? You need someone who kind of sits in the middle. That's the dramaturg. So that's what the dramaturg does. They just sit in the middle between your story and the audience, and they provide really good feedback from this place. At least good dramaturgs will, right? And their goal is to help the story become the best version of itself. Um, and that, yeah, it's really important, and I've certainly experienced this in my creative process and even in my healing journey, right? If we go too far, too long without any kind of feedback, without any kind of peer support, right? We go way off balance. We kind of go off the deep end. Um, and that happens in our creative process too. And it's because there's meant to be someone to sit here and give that balance. We're not supposed to create, without support. So divinatory dramaturgy is all of that, except it's feedback that is given with awareness of the spirit world, right? It sees the energy, it sees the medicine, it sees the altar, it sees the ancestral gifts coming into fruition. Um, And yeah, the really cool thing about divinatory dramaturgy is that we can sit with your study, sit with your story as an altar, even before you've created it, right? Before it exists. And that's the divinatory part of it, right? That's the channeling part of it, right? That's the way that, if you have a seed in your heart, I, as an oracle, as a channeler, as an ancestral communicator, right? I can sit with you and be like, I see the entire altar. Maybe it's gonna take 5, 10 years for you to like actually tell the story. But, I can see, it's a purple sky, right? What's that about? And then we can go in and kind of like unfold the meaning of that. And so, we can do that if it's a seed in your heart, if you're in the middle of writing it, or if you're, in production process and you need that, like you're kind of in that mode, right? Of things are quickly moving. It's not as like, flowy and exploratory. Um, Divinatory dramaturg meets you where you're at, wherever it is. And whatever comes up through the altar will be the guidance needed for the particular moment. And so in my practice, I do this for myself and I do this for others, right? Uh, so that's, something to note, right? Like I'm a Gemini, I'm a shapeshifter, so I can jump from writer to director to dramaturg really easily. Um, so sometimes I'll be like, I'm writing and directing, and then I'll step back and be like, let me look at my own story like a dramaturg. And it's really important for me to bring in other people to my process too. Um, so there's like a layer of, that kind of role that we can play for ourselves and others. But when I do that for myself or for others, I can look at the story and say like, oh, okay, this is how your altar is functioning. This is, the cosmic, energy around it. These are the soul contracts that I see. This is like what's emerging as medicine. Here are the altar pieces that I see. Here are the relationship agreements. Um, and so yeah, we can sit together and we pull out the medicine. And all of it is designed to, pour specific kind of support into your process that your process needs to thrive. And I'm really excited to offer these services, officially, yay, um, to folks. I really want to know I want to know about the amazing projects that you're working on and the amazing stories that are emerging because there are, I know that there's so many people out there who are collaborating with their ancestors and bringing forth really exciting stories that are needed um, in this movement. And that's really the thing that makes me happy, right? Is to just be in community with others who are creating in this way. And so, I'm available to come onto projects as spiritual advisor, divinatory dramaturg, um, and any kind of support in this kind of realm that you might need if you're creating in this way. And yeah, I just opened my books for one-on-one uh private consultation. You know, I can take one-on-one, I can take a small team too. Um, two-person team, that kind of thing. And yeah, we just sit down and we look at your project as an altar and we pull out all the medicine and we just do the thing that way. Yeah, available to come on to like sets and all that kind of stuff, film sets, TV sets. But my prerequisite for that is the first initial private consultation, which we would do over Zoom. So that's a 90-minute thing. And yeah, my books are open. I just opened them as of July 8th, 2025. So if you are listening in real time, you can check out the links below if you want support in your process in this way. Um, and yeah, if you're listening sometime in the future, you can just check out the website and see whatever the heck I'm doing in the future. And I am happy to say as well, finally, if you've been following along, in the last four classes, I've been slowly revealing the Spider-Woman Network, right? Which is a storyteller, producer, and showrunners guild for the planetary artist in residence. Um, and this is a network, a gathering place specifically for those of us who are storytellers and work with our ancestors and create in the spirit of liberation. So finally, the Spider-Woman Network is live. So the links are live. You can check out everything on the website now. I'm going to put all the links below in the show notes. And we are in our Kickstarter moment as a guild. Um, and yeah, so this is, our moment of saying this is a seed that we have. Um, I really want to bring together folks who are like, let's figure out how to make a thriving ecosystem. Let's ha figure out how to really support each other through this process. Let's come together with our gifts and make this life path really sing. And so we're kickstarting right now. And so you can check it out. You can check out my vision, check out everything that, I've been concocting and bringing forth. And, if it speaks to you, you can make an offering to our seed foundation, to our Kickstarter. Um, and everyone who makes an offering to the Kickstarter will get access to a survey. And so on this survey, you can let me know, like, what are you working on? You have a question about, working with your ancestors. Where do you have a lot of skills? Where do you have a lot of gifts? Where do you need more support? And then I'll be able to take, um, the answers that I get on this survey. And one thing is just my way of being able to like get to know people more who are working in this realm because I would really like to do that, right? Build more places, ri river systems and pathways to organize us so that we can be in touch more and understand just who's out there and who's doing what, right? And maybe fill in puzzle pieces for each other. Um, and just, have a space where this type of creation is explicitly supported. Um, Yeah, and so when I get those surveys, I will be able to use your answers to create content for this open classroom. So I can speak to your questions here, and I'll also be providing closed group divination recordings for our Kickstarters. And so I'll be able to, start seeing how we're weaving all together with each other, right? Weaving Spider-Woman, and do some of that like eagle eye view and kind of, offer insight support, guidance, and those will be recordings just for people who support the Kickstarter. So, just check out the links and see what speaks to you. And if you want that private support, definitely book a session with me. And yeah, that'll be it for today's open classroom. Until next time, peace.